So, yeah, welcome everyone again. It's really nice to have you. Yeah, my name's Becky and I am Becky Whittle, and I put this session together, but it's totally not my, like I've completely piggybacked off other people's ideas, which I'll explain about in a minute. But I just want to say it's really lovely to have you here, and we've got our three fabulous speakers, Kate, Maria and Zoe, and Melanie also from the NRFC team, who's helping us with technical stuff and kind of and with the chat. So yeah, I know a lot of people have been looking forward to the session. So yeah, we'll have all of our speakers and I'll introduce them in a minute and say a little bit about the session, but the speakers are going to speak for about 15 minutes and then we'll have time hopefully for some good kind of questions and discussion afterwards. Please feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves and say what makes you interested in this topic or what brings you to this session. As the speakers are speaking, you're very welcome to pop questions in the chat as well, and Melanie will kind of keep an eye on them and sort of collate them all for us. But I'll also let, when it's time for questions, I'll let people unmute and yeah, ask the questions themselves, because I think that makes it nice and a bit more interactive. So let me introduce, we've got three speakers for you tonight. So we've got Kate Makin, who's the owner and founder of Northern Yarn. And Kate's, yeah, as a local wool shop, local yarn shop in Lancaster. And Kate will tell you her story in the presentation, so I don't want to preempt that, but she now produces her own yarn from local kind of local sheep. And part of the story of Northern Yarn was about how, you know, when Kate first moved to the area there, we were sort of surrounded by farms, but it was really hard to buy local yarn. So that's Kate. We've got Maria, who's the co-founder of Dodgson Woods, which is a farm diversification business based at Nibthwaite Grange. Maria, I've seen Maria do fantastic talks on this topic on kind of farming, and she'll tell you all about the current project that she's working on with Zoe, the flock, and also some recent interesting conversations with the wool board. So you'll hear quite a lot about the role of the wool board, obviously, this evening. And then Zoe is, Zoe from the Woolist, Zoe Fletcher. So again, so I first met, this is what I mean about how this is totally not my event. So I first kind of met, well, certainly Zoe and Maria when Kate organised, it was a third-year birthday party, wasn't it, Kate, for Northern Yarn? Was that right? Was it 3 years?
I think it was a night at the museum event.
It was that before the third-year birthday? I
can't remember.
I can't.
No, yeah, it was before, yeah.
But it was amazing. Kate did a night in, well, it's Night in the Museum as it was called, at Lancaster Museum, and she had Zoe, Maria and Andrea Meanwell, who was also going to join us tonight, but is away in Scotland without Wi-Fi, having a rare and well-deserved break. So yeah, and it was just fascinating. You know, it was really so I came to this topic as so my background, I do a lot of work. I work part-time at Lancaster Environment Centre, and my focus has always been local and sustainable food production, really. And I do a lot of work with food futures, hence my sort of role with this conference a little bit. But I was also a crafter, and yeah, really got back into knitting in a big way a few years ago, and that was obviously how I kind of met Kate. And yeah, it was when Kate did that night at the museum and I heard Maria and Andrea and Zoe speak, I was really, it suddenly just really dawned on me that, hang on, textiles is every bit as much of an agricultural product as food is. And I've done sort of a bit of permaculture training, and obviously that's made me think a lot about multifunctional landscapes and the kind of different ties that we can have with the land. So I just found myself at last year's Northern Real Farming Conference, which was awesome, but I found myself at it thinking about how actually the conversation was all about food, and I really felt like textiles should be part of it. I know there's some amazing textile, sort of local and regenerative kind of textile based movements going on around here in Lancaster. People might have heard of the Fibre Shed movement that I know Maria's part of as well, and I think Zoe, you're part of Fibre Shed too, and Kate, I think you all are, aren't you? So yeah, it's not just wool, there's kind of a very sort of innovative flax project going on over at Halton. And yeah, please tell us in the chat, people from other places, what's going on near you. It'd be really lovely to hear some of that. So yeah, this is hopefully an attempt to bring kind of textiles into the conversation about sort of regenerative northern farming. And yeah, so Zoe again, who I met through Kate's Night at the Museum, Zoe runs the Woolist, which is an amazing, if you haven't checked it out, please give it a Google. It's an amazing, comes out of her PhD research into into the properties of different breeds of wool from different types of sheep, and it's just amazing. Like it's best, obviously, we know it was lovely. I remember, Zoe, when you came to the museum and you brought all those like samples, and we were able to, you can really touch and see like the color, but there's all sorts of science about like the staple length and the kind of the properties of the fleece, and that Zoe and Maria will tell you about the project, the flock that they're running together, which kind of, yeah, very much is about, I think, bringing the properties of British wool and things together with the contemporary sustainable fashion industry. So that is more than enough from me. So like I say, I just kept listening to this conversation, and Kate did a kind of an update of this event back in July. She did an evening with Northern Yarn and friends, and I just thought this is a conversation that needs to be had with a farming audience as well as a crafting one. So I hope you enjoy it. And Maria was going to go first, but because she's had to run to a different building and get her slides and things, I'm going to let Kate go first and tell you all about the Northern Yarn story and what she does. So over to you, Kate.
Lovely. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here with you all tonight. So yeah, I run Northern Yarn, which is a wool shop in Lancaster with a really strong focus on British wool and local wools where I can find them. I'm going to share my screen with you, and I can show you some slides and talk at the same time. No. Now this worked in the practice, didn't it?
It's totally fine. Totally fine.
Let me try that one.
I can see, I think Hannah's knitting. I don't think anyone's in any hurry. People seem, that's a nice thing about an evening session. Everyone's very, very chilled.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, that's good. It's coming. It's just to your computer.
Gone off. Sorry.
It's all right.
It should be on this one.
Yay!
Okay.
That's good.
Got it. So if I do that, that's it, isn't it?
That's perfect. You're good to go.
Fantastic. So yeah, so I wanted to explain a bit why I'm talking to you tonight at the farming event. So I started my business 6 years ago when me and my family sort of moved back to the northwest after a long time in London, and the idea to start the business came from a lifelong love of knitting and a series of fortunate events, really. So this is my shop in Lancaster, and I'm proud to say that all of those sweaters there are made from local yarn, local farms, knitted by me. But I'm really proud that I can stock local wool in the shop and work with local farmers. So I just did really quickly to life in Lancaster when we moved up. I was just struck immediately, of course, moving from the big smoke to Lancaster, the amount of green, lush countryside there was around, and the amount of sheep that we could see. You know, my daughters go to a school out in the countryside, and we passed all these farms every day, and yet when I tried to find sort of local yarns, British yarns, at the local wool shop, I couldn't find any. Or what I could find had been maybe British yarn, but spun abroad. So that kind of started a few triggers in my head about what I wanted to be knitting with, and why I couldn't find it. So my youngest was just started to go to nursery, so I was ready to go back to work, and the final big bang was that our local wool shop closed. So it kind of gave me the push to start Northern Yarn and think about how I wanted it to run as a business, and that was alongside our local community, using the seemingly plentiful resource that was around us everywhere. And I wanted to go and talk to these farmers who, you know, had these sheep that had fleeces that I coveted. So the next screen. So I literally, I did lots of research into British wool, and I found West Yorkshire spinners who produce some excellent yarns, all with British wool. But I was really happy to find Lancashire farm wool. So Kate Schofield, who lives in Cheshire, and she works with farms around Silverdale and produces, and Trafford Bowland, and produces a lovely range of just natural, undyed, breed-specific yarns. So together with a few other bits and pieces, I literally took the wool to market, Garstang and Lancaster. I think this was my first market store, and it was really hard work. We'd set up in all weathers, rain, snow, but it was a lot of fun. And I quickly realised that lots of other people were already British wool advocates and wanted to know, like myself, where they could buy breed specific and traceable yarns. And what's the next one? Sorry about that. So what I thought quite quickly was one way to learn about British wool was like a grassroots approach and learn on the job and have my own yarn produced from local farms. So that's what I did, and I spoke. This is Lucy, who lives in Garstang. She found me on the market, and she brought with her a lock of fleece from her Lovely's Warbles there, and asked if I'd be interested in doing anything with it. And it was beautiful. That the sort of tips were caramelized and bleached by the sun, and she only had a small flock. And as I did more research, that was to be a bit of a hurdle when it came to having wool produced from single farms. But I did have some warbles, Pure's warbles spun, and it now goes into a bigger blend of our Meatherer yarn to make a natural grey. This is John and Maria, who's here tonight. And it was through talking to farmers and learning more about the work that they did that really inspired me to have my yarn produced and support them by paying more for the fleeces than the British wool give at the moment. And with British wool being, there's so many valuable properties, as we all know, warm, renewable, sustainable. And I was learning so much. Especially from people like Maria and John, about their rare breeds and how they use their animals on the farm for the conservation grazing. It was a real education, and still is. Much more close to me was a farm in Quarmer, and these are pedigree Pole Dorset lambs. And I met Lynn, who looks after them, at the school gates, and just asked her really what breed she kept, and did she know what happened to the wool when the sheep got sheared, where did it go? And she said that she didn't have much to do with it once it was off their backs, and but that often the cost of shearing and transport for the fleeces to the wool board would be more than the actual return on the fleeces. So she asked me if I'd like to come and see them being sheared, and Lynn has been really helpful in the whole process, really, and it helped me pick fleeces and clears a space for me in the barns, and it's been really lovely working with Lynn. And here I am. So I've got, there are quite a few really good fibre resource books, and of course Zoe, who is the font of all knowledge with breeds and fleeces. But at that time I consulted a big fibre book and looked up Pole Dorset and found out the properties and what I might expect when I had it spun. And it's a crisp yarn, it's not the softest yarn, but these are all shearling fleeces here, and just beautiful, really lovely, strong, with a nice crimp. And I was excited to have some wool spun. I learned things like a break in the staple. So when you're looking at the fibre, you can kind of bounce it and pull it. And if the sheep has been ill or had a traumatic childbirth, or there can be a break in the staple length. And it was funny, I related it to, I had quite a traumatic experience when I gave birth to, and I had dints in my toenails that kind of grew out in the same kind of way that I guess the sheep's fleece staple breaks. I found that quite interesting. We're all animals. So I found the first thing was ringing around nearly all the mills in the UK, and there aren't that many actually, but they've all got different requirements. They've all got different minimum quantities. Some of them will only take quantities of fleece that's been scoured already. And if you want to go to the scourers, that they're so big and deal with so much fleece that you need hundreds and hundreds of kilos to go in. So of course, with this small amount, I had to look elsewhere. And I found Paul Crooks of Halifax Spinning Mill, and it was really knowledgeable. He's been spinning since he was, I don't know, 12, something crazy. He knows so much, and he was really, really helpful and invited me to the mill and agreed to spin. I think I had 2 lots. So I had some lamb's wool, 30 kilos of lamb's wool and 30 kilos of the Pole Dorset shearling in the blueface Leicester. And there it is. So when it arrived back, I was really nervous at the time. Like I'd only been, the business had only been going a couple of months when I decided to jump in and just, see if I could have yarn produced. So I didn't know what it'd be like, but I was really, really pleased. The lamb's wool actually turned out to be really good sock wool, quite strong, and I think the Dorset yarns have a natural washing property, so they're almost machine washable. They don't felt, which was really cool. It was 100% traceable. These photos were taken on Clougher Fell, which is, you'll probably all know, it's a fell just outside of Lancaster, and it's looking over the fields to where the sheep live. So it was nice to take those. Oh yeah, there's another one. We named it Jennet, our 4-ply, after a Lancastrian legend of the 16th century. Jennet, a few people had told me this story, and Jennet had ridden on horseback to London to rescue her orphaned grandchildren, and she rode alone with the grandchildren in her panniers all the way back to Lancaster. And so we thought we should honour her, and I don't know what she'd think about it, but we named this wool after her, Jennet, and there she is on the heather. This is me in the Pole Dorset and Blueface Leicester sweater. So it's really warm, really full yarn it produced. And we had a designer make a wrap. This was the Fleetwood wrap that was a nod to the old fishing town of Fleetwood. And there's just another selection. We went on to have more breed-specific yarns produced from single farms. So we had some Kerry Hill. I think we had Lonk, which was great because it was a native Lancastrian sheep that would go on the Ribble Valley. They were a hill breed. There's Warbles. We had mule produced. And this one is this one's at the scouring plant in Bradford. And after we'd done lots of single farm yarns, we really wanted to have a yarn that could be a consistent line, and that we could maybe have some colours dyed. And because you need big minimum quantities for colours, I needed to think a bit more broader. And so we decided to go to several farms, or 4 farms actually, and blend those breeds to get our quantity. So they actually halted production here. Again, really helpful and kind, and kind of a bit amused, I think. They let us come and put our little 250 kilos on. They stopped everything and let us watch it being scoured, which is here. So it went in and out of the water all the way along the warehouse, and then it goes, after it's been washed, into a big kind of dryer, and you can completely see why they need the quantities, because any smaller amount would just get lost in the machines. I think I've skipped. This is at the carders, so we couldn't stay and watch it being carded, but they did allow us to see the whole scouring, and we took it off to the carders then and left it here. But this is some of the yarn that was being carded there into the noils, I think it's called. No, comb. Yeah, comb there. This is just a picture of some of the yarns we've got at the shop. I've skipped one. This is Medera. So this was a breed, a combination of 4 breeds. Cheviot, which initially Maria, I thought, because Maria and John keep Cheviot, and had it produced as a yarn, so I knew it was a really lovely strong yarn as a base. So we've got the majority of this yarn is Cheviot with blue-faced Leicester, Shetland, and just 5% as warbles, which makes that natural grey. So I found that all these sweaters here, these are all knitted with the Methera. I just found being able to make clothes from fully traceable yarns, grown and spun in the Northwest. It's just something that makes me really happy, and it really connects me to the yarn that I use, to what I'm doing, and the people and the landscape. It all just ties in really nicely, and it feels good to be knitting with traceable yarns. I want to continue to work with farmers and produce local wool, and I think that's it really. I hope you've enjoyed listening to a bit about why I started and why I enjoy what I do so much. I'm learning all the time. But I've just found everyone along the journey has been really helpful and knowledgeable, and just we'll share knowledge if you ask, and it's all there from people like Zoe and Maria. It's been a great journey, and I hope to continue doing it sometime.
Thank you, Kate. That was awesome, and it's really lovely to. I'd never seen those pictures of, like, you know, inside the mill either. That's really interesting, isn't it? And like that, and that's part of the story, I guess, isn't it? Like you said, is that processing capacity. And Melanie's just put in the chat there about, we used to have school visits to the woolen mills in Bradford, and they're long gone now. You know, and a lot of it feels like there's well, I won't say too much because, you know, it's going to be covered, isn't it, in the rest of the talks. But there's a big effort, feels like, going on to sort of like to re-energize like a lot of this, and I guess it involves getting that capacity back. But
it is, and it is exciting. You know, there are, I think we've talked about it, but a few events, those connections that have maybe got a bit lost for various reasons along the way. You know, wool being spun elsewhere, synthetic fibers, all of those things that contribute to it. So yeah, but it's a nice movement heading back and appreciating, you know, where it comes from, and looking at what's around us and using those resources that we've got. Definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Kate. I know there'll be lots of questions. I'll wait to questions to the end, but there's already some lovely comments in the chat. So Hannah's wearing a Methera jumper that she's made, which is great. And Connor said, that's wonderful. Thanks for your story. My mother would have loved to have heard that. So yeah, that's great.
Thank you for listening.
Very welcome. So who wants to go next? Maria, are you, should we try your slides? Is that?
Yeah, I managed to get them, so
yay, well done.
Just sure it will work. Does that work? Does that use slideshow? Is that okay?
Not yet. I can't see it. Can anyone else see it? No.
Oh, was I supposed to share my?
Yeah, if you try.
Let's see. How do you share screen on this?
You got the green button at the bottom. Can you see that in the Zoom window, share screen? It's not there.
No, normally it's just there, and it's
Weird. Hang on, if
it's really easy to
that is very strange. We might have to is it, do you want to email it to me, Maria, and then like I could share it for you? Is that going to work?
Oh, it's a big file. It took me forever it did an email, so I had to run upstairs, put it on a hard drive, run back down. But all I've got at the bottom is security certificate. There's no option to share screen.
That is really weird. That's really weird because you're a co-host and everything. I tell you what, I might get Zoe to go.
Zoe to go
next, if that's all right, and I'll fiddle around and see if Martin can help us. Well, in the background.
In the meantime, I'll try and email this to you, but as I say, it might be a bit big.
Don't worry, that's fine. We'll I'll see if I can get Martin on the
Zoe's okay to go next.
Yeah,
thanks,
absolutely.
Zoe.
You can bring it back around to the farming, and then we've done the full cycle. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now, and then I'll start chatting about who I am. So hopefully, let's see if this works. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, you're good.
Perfect. Okay. So my name's Zoe. I was lucky enough to do a fully funded PhD under the AHRC, so a arts, craft, fashion and textiles based program. So I come at this from a textile design and knitwear designer background, but I was really interested in kind of looking into where my materials came from. So I'm going to focus on the PhD research, but I just kind of think it's interesting for you to kind of see that this is quite a scientific based project, but it is about kind of the aesthetics and the needs and the characteristics of wool, and how to kind of adapt that into real life situations that designers can use and can adapt to their own needs as well. So my kind of purpose for this, and the kind of question I set myself, was that I wanted to kind of create a British sheep breeds database that made accessible practical knowledge, and that there's so much, like Kate said, kind of once you get talking to people from farmers to production managers to scientists to knitters to crafters to crocheters, they all have a different vocabulary of how to describe the characteristics and that tacit knowledge that they know through making. So understanding and compiling some sort of database in order to kind of assess not just the breed characteristics for commercial data that's needed by designers and makers like Kate for creating beautiful yarns, but also the narrative behind it, so those breed histories and the associated provenance, and for aiding, like I said before, kind of designers and craftspeople, hopefully in this upward spiral of bringing British wool back to the forefront of luxury material, thoughtful, conscious consumption. So kind of not into fast fashion, not kind of overconsumption, but bringing it into where materials are appreciated and everyone within that chain is appreciated. So kind of my overarching aim was to design a physical and digital toolkit for designers to understand different qualities of purebred British wool for knitwear. So I wanted to experiment with new knitwear technologies to push the boundaries of conventional use, understand why production wasn't as prevalent within the UK, what we could do to bring things back to the UK, how British sheep breed characteristics had formed this production chain and this successful kind of chain that we did have, and how we could bring it back. But also how designers could be empowered to use more British wool within their designs, within their yarn collections. If it's not there for them to test out, then how are they ever going to find out that British wool is way more than an itchy, scratchy material that everyone seems to jump to? But also, as I said before, link that heritage of wool with contemporary practice to add value to, unfortunately, an underutilised fibre at the moment. So kind of wool has some amazing overarching characteristics that, even though synthetics kind of wool is only 1% of global textile production now, however, synthetics have never been successfully able to replicate all the qualities of wool. So it controls temperature, wicks moisture away, dirt resistant, biodegradable, hypoallergenic, all these amazing qualities inbuilt naturally in a naturally renewable resource. And within that, it's not just 100% wool. 100% wool is fantastic, but once you start to see how many different varieties we have, so kind of written down on paper, the British Wool Board state there's over 60. I analysed 72 different breeds that are now predominantly classed as purebred British sheep. And once you go into kind of crossbreeds and mules, there's hundreds of different ones within it. And they all hold very different characteristics. So a Herdwick on the hills and a Herdwick turned into yarn comes out very differently to a blue-faced Leicester sheep on the hills and a blue-faced Leicester yarn to knit with. So I kind of utilised British Wool's data for characterisation and classification. So they classify them into 7 different breed categories: fine, medium, cross, luster, hill, mountain, and naturally coloured. And I didn't look into the cross ones because although they classify 5 as them, actually there's hundreds of cross breeds in all different determinations and percentages. So for this, I just focused on the pure breed to gather those foundations. And currently kind of a very, very simplified version of the system that British Wool goes through is that farmers, if you have more than 4 sheep, should be registered with the British Wool Marketing Board, and fleece is then sent to a local collection site. You do have to pay for them to collect it. It then gets sent to the national facility where it's sorted and graded. And it's currently graded into, at the time when I did the research in 2014, it was 120 different grades. However, they're added and taken away all the time. And this is where that kind of homogeny between breed specifics starts to differ. So you could have grade 362 and that actually contains blue-faced Leicester type fleece. So it might not actually be 100% blue-faced Leicester, but the characteristics are very similar to a blue-faced Leicester fleece. So that kind of traceability and the provenance that we are able to have on that scale because of the way that the stratified sheep system and farming system is in the UK was actually starting to be lost within that. However, it's then baled and graded and then sent out for auction at monthly auctions throughout the year. So from a design perspective, it was great to kind of understand what was happening with wool right now, but from a designer's needs, what qualities did we need to know about, and what did I need to focus upon in order to gather the best kind of information out of it that was useful for designers at different stages of utilising British wool. So the luster really helps with how a yarn takes dye, the sheen of it, how it knits up, the stitch definition, the crimp, so that kind of elasticity within it, whether it can be woolen or worsted spun, depends on the staple length and the different processes it has to go through. And then that base colour, like Kate touched upon, sometimes for the kind of carpet manufacture, which is unfortunately kind of where 80% of our fleeces go into, they want a kind of cream white base, because any of those grey or black guard hairs or fleeces make it a much tougher job to dye to the latest trends. Whereas actually when you talk to crafters and knitters and makers, some of the natural colours that you can get are actually some of the most interesting ones to work with, and you don't need to dye them, or you can have a really nice grey base, a grey fleck base like Kate has, to really differentiate and start to bring in some interest on the dye process. So I wanted to make it visually appealing so people kind of come in at different levels. You didn't have to be a sheep expert or a wool expert, you just needed to be interested in where your materials came from and what kind of qualities you wanted within your final products, whether you were knitting it, crafting with it, knitting it commercially, crocheting it, felting it, whatever you wanted to do. So as I said before, I kind of categorized them into fine, medium, hill, mountain, luster and coloured, but then looked into the commercial data that was available for them, and what you need to understand how fine you can spin it, what the handle's going to look like, the staple length, as I said before, whether it goes through a woolen or worsted spinning process, the colour for kind of dyes, the actual weight or average weight of fleece that you get off a sheep, because if you are a designer and you want to make 10,000 jumpers from rare breed Borrowbridge, you're not going to have enough, there's not enough fleece in the land to allow you to do that. However, if you wanted 10,000 jumpers made from Cheviot, that might be a little bit more accessible. So when I kind of started the research, this is the data that I was gifted with. And if you don't know what the colour YZ or colour D65 or VM base means, it's very hard to start to kind of differentiate what those characteristics could mean for an end yarn or an end kind of processed product. So what I wanted to do was make it more approachable. And obviously some of these characteristics, some of this data is really important to know. However, making it more attainable, making it more accessible, and putting it into kind of a context and a narrative that allowed a lot more people access to it. And also allowing people to talk through kind of their own narrative as well. So I kind of touched upon before, working with different knitters, different designers, going to different sheep shows, workshops, getting people to kind of touch and feel the yarn and really start to kind of interact with it to gather a little bit of, almost create a library of words of how people describe these different handles. So some people would absolutely kind of touch the Herdwick fleece and automatically kind of recoil away, and they hated it because it had all those kind of guard heads in. However, some people felt that it was rustic and it kind of gave this kind of earthy realness to wool, and they wanted that. So understanding that narrative was really important to me as well. And again, kind of we can't compete with new manufacturing sites like China, India, Pakistan on price, but what we can do is incorporate all this amazing heritage and narrative that we have within the sheep industry and within farming, with the kind of access we have to new technologies for kind of sustainable sampling and new sampling technology, with the kind of quality of knowing exactly what we can put in our yarns and the blends and the breeds, and connecting up within kind of new networks of people that are really passionate about the same objectives as me and as others, to create this kind of upward spiral, as I said before, for a desirable material. So underneath that, in kind of an academic context, was the fact that it was all design based, but within that I needed to understand about the industry and marketing, how technology factored into it, sustainability and my own sustainable principles, as well as kind of what was available and what was out there in the wider context. Craft and the handmade and how that factored in, as well as kind of the overarching theme of what those breed characteristics were, how they differentiated from each other, and how we could start to add value through all those different stories. So again, I kind of mentioned it was about connecting. So I had kind of the most amazing conversations with some of the most knowledgeable and lovely people, connecting kind of farmers and talking to dyers and what kind of characteristics they liked, what the kind of challenges and advantages were to using different things, what makers needed out of it, what buyers wanted, what customers and designers. And so all these different conversations to understand what was really needed from a database and how to bridge those gaps. And again, important to me and important to kind of create this accessibility was how to document it, how to display it, and how to experiment with it. So kind of looking at it right from kind of those micro qualities of using SEM imaging to look into each breed sample. So I collected a fleece sample, whatever I could get commercially that had already been commercially spun into yarn, a yarn sample. If I couldn't find it already spun, I got it spun up in either hand spun or woolen spun. But looking at it right from kind of that scale structure and seeing those differences, even just aligned, kind of how many is there? 7 of them next to each other, and seeing how that different scale structure affects the felting qualities, the way it takes dye, the way that kind of the yarn gets can get structured within the combing process is all related to those initial scale structures. And also they look really nice, and it's something that you don't get to see very often anymore. And then taking that right through to kind of really advanced technology that was available. So the Shimashiki SDS1 Apex 3, which is a bit of a mouthful, allows you to kind of digitize those yarns. So from the microscopic qualities through to being able to scan them in, not waste any of those precious yarns, but create a digital reconstruction of them to understand whether they would go through different gauge machines, how they would act knitted up, whether there was any kind of you didn't want to waste any resources through putting them really through the machines, and kind of creating that variety so seeing how different the British Ruse looked against the Castle Moret, and creating this library just as a visual to kind of show the differences between breeds. You've got kind of Hebridean next to Herdwick, next to Jacob, and Lincoln Longwool. You can really start to see the variety there, and all 72 are different. And mapping those against kind of colour technologies as well, and seeing how kind of naturally coloured ones could factor into not having to dye them from a sustainability perspective. So some of the outcomes were that in my spare time, I enjoy drawing sheep. So kind of the aesthetics of looking at the sheep breeds and seeing all those different visual characteristics of them next to one another. Collecting 72 British pure breed yarn samples so you can squish them so you can see the difference. A Blueface Leicester woolen spun looks next to a Blueface Leicester worsted spun, whether some of them can be worsted or woolen spun, or whether the staple length affects the different abilities, how they knit up together. So they're all knitted on the same amount of stitches. However, you can see the vast array of different squares there needed just because of the process that the yarn had gone through, how much it folds, how much kind of the stitch definition is there, and also just a nice way of seeing all those different colours mapped out against one another. A room full of sketchbooks about my journey, so kind of visiting the sorting facility at British Wool, visiting different designers, mapping out Shima designs, going to different kind of working with, so I got, like Kate did, I got some yarns woolen spun at Paul's mill, so seeing how those different processes start to take this kind of raw fibre through to a workable yarn. Again, kind of making it visually appealing so people wanted to come and become kind of intrigued with all these different breeds. So instead of it just being some sheep out in a field, actually starting to be able to feel and touch and see those differences themselves. So in the end, it was a compilation of completed data sheets, so compiling all that lot of data into something that was quite a simple, aesthetically pleasing way that is very comparable. So kind of you can put the Black Welsh Mountain next to the Cotswold, you've got all that commercial data like the micron count and the handle, but you've also got that narrative and that tacit knowledge of the microscopic qualities sitting next to the knitted sample and the raw fleece samples. Again, a little bit, if you wanted to delve a little bit deeper, created mini breed books for each of the 72 breeds that kind of talk through the breed society, the different kind of placing on the fleece, how much fleece, the fleece weight you might get from certain ones. Again, kind of that historical narrative and where you might find them today, how they've evolved and developed over time. And then, yeah, so all of that is in kind of a physical toolkit that is kind of has been exhibited at a few different places now. So this is in Manchester School of Art. Next to kind of the digital outcomes, so a British Breeds virtual yarn library that if knitwear designers wanted to use the Shimashiki technology, they could utilise the British Breeds library to start to work in whether British wool would work within their designs without actually having to buy any of the yarn or waste any of those resources. So it's all kind of compiled and available on the woolist.co.uk website, so you can have a play around there and have a look at all the different sheep breeds and some knowledge. It's obviously there's 72 breeds, so it's getting updated continuously. And I hope to kind of have a little bit more time in the future to add to that and really start to connect in more makers and what makers and crafters and designers are working on at the moment with those different breeds. But it allows you at the moment to kind of use the search function to look into how 72 breeds is fantastic, but there's so much variation. As a designer, what characteristics do you want out of your yarn at the end of it? So this is just an example of a designer may want a very soft handle. So you go down from kind of 72 breeds through to kind of 7 breeds that come up as the handle is very soft. The colour and what you might want to do with it narrows it down to kind of those 4 breeds, the staple length. So whether you want it woolen spun or worsted spun, can take that down again. And then it starts to kind of, you could look into geographical location. So whether locality is important to you, or whether you want to kind of find someone within your local vicinity, and that could start to help to narrow down the perfect breed for your end garment. So as I said before, kind of it's been exhibited in quite a few different places now. So this was Edinburgh Yarn Festival in 2000, might not have been 2000, oh, it was 2019, yeah, 2019. Taking kind of my work and exhibiting it, talking about it, and then allowing people to kind of have a hands-on exploration to collect more data for me, but also allow them to see all the different breeds together. Swatch samples for designers to test, as well as kind of using wool in different mediums, so taking it from kind of knitwear design and allowing other people to start playing around with it. So there's been some fantastic embroidery samples there, crochet, all these different kind of kits are available for people to try out and test out those different breeds now as well. So that kind of led me to working with Maria. So I was really interested in, I found out all this information about the different breeds, but what I was really interested in as well was how to find farmers that worked in a similar way to me, and that ethos of regenerative farming, making sure kind of it wasn't about depleting resources. It was about, one, obviously kind of really looking after the animals, but also understanding the properties that were needed for a fantastic yarn at the end of it. So kind of building up those relationships and kind of looking into transparent field to yarn practices. So we've been working together, pushing through kind of making sure we empower the farmers, looking into all these different yarn production facilities and seeing how to build up those relationships. Again, kind of building up on that authentic sustainability and making sure that we know where our yarns come from. So we've done quite a lot of exciting kind of blending for breeds, for yarn experimentation. As Kate said, kind of some breeds you cannot find enough of to go into commercial production. So how can we kind of blend those together? What are great bases? How do we work to create this variety and showcase this variety that isn't available at present for designers working at commercial level, as well kind of through to hand knitting and domestic machine knitting, but what characteristics are needed and what we need to kind of tick off in order to make wool more accessible for a wider audience and hopefully bring that into a sustainable fashion system. So working with like-minded production partners, again, kind of like Kate said, Bradford was and used to be kind of the epicenter for it. Now, unfortunately, there's not that many left, but we have kind of found some fantastic ones. Paul based over in Bridlington. There's a few that we have just had doors open to, and we're really excited about the conversations that we've had with them and look forward to working with them to kind of figure out and find out all these different little bits of the journey that need plugging together to kind of fix that jigsaw together to create a really sustainable and traceable product. So these are just some of the experimental yarns that we've worked with. So incorporating Blueface Leicester with Castle McMorrick, we've got some Hebridean and Blueface Leicester, and some Cheviot as a beautiful base as well. So we've been having fun experimenting with different knitting techniques, with different production techniques to create different knitting weights. So kind of this really beautiful French knitted, commercially French knitted yarn that kind of has has the feel of chunkiness, but it's as light as air. It's almost got those kind of mohair qualities to it, but that's in 100% cheviot, which hasn't been done before. It's only been replicated with synthetics. Taking it out and about. So Maria organised the farmers' yarns and we had an amazing time. Kate was next door. She was there. Ubus Knitwear was there. There was a load of different designers and makers that had this same kind of ethos around locality and really kind of supporting the fibres and the manufacturer that were around them. Again, kind of testing the yarn and commercial production like we talked about. So working with Knit Lab North, using commercial kind of level machines, but utilising British wool, 100% British wool yarns within them. And these are just a few of the garments. I think Maria is wearing her poncho tonight, so you can get a better look at it there. But this is Ubus Knitwear, and they've used, I think there's Blueface Leicester blended with Castle Milk Morit in both of those designs. So it's really exciting to see how our time and expertise and Maria's amazing, beautiful sheep fleeces have gone into these kind of finished projects. So we're really excited. I think that was my last one. We're really excited to see kind of where this journey takes us, and really passionate about kind of connecting all those dots together. Because at the moment it still feels like there's a lot of disconnection, kind of a lot of manufacturers offshore, but bringing it back and allowing people into that conversation, into that journey, to hopefully kind of show them that, yes, on the news you might see that British fleece is only worth 30 pence, but then when you're up against, well, why is this jumper, British wool jumper, now £400? Actually showing them all the processes and all the people that has to support within that journey as well is just as important. And actually a £10 jumper is not the reality. A lot of people are missing out on that. A £10 jumper is a misconception. It's, you can't talk to me about economies of scale, can never, no matter how much you make, can never justify a £10 jumper. But yes, so that is me. That is our journey so far, and we're really looking forward to kind of testing that further and assimilating kind of some of my research and Maria's kind of knowledge into this new setup. So I will stop sharing and stop my voice.
Thank you so much, Zoe. That was so interesting. And yeah, you'll see the chat, everyone's like, Adrian's just said, what a treasure trove of information. And there's people sharing stories of, like, Jane's sharing stories from Orkney of breeds and farmers that she works with there. Martin shared a friend of his, Nick Kendall, who again works with Herdwick. So yeah, and just, you know, I can testify to how practically useful that Woolist is. You know, we had I'm part of another kind of local textile project that I might be able to say a bit about later, but we had a lady gave us a fleece from one of her pet sheep called Noddy, and all we knew, it was like, what sort of breed is Noddy, like what? And they wanted us to spin and knit with him, and it's like, well, we need to find out, like, what sort of sheep is Noddy. And she's, oh, he's a Southdown. So I went on the Woolist, like, yeah, now I know exactly what Southdown's going to be like. And yeah, it was so useful. So thank you, that's brilliant, Zoe. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be loads of questions for you later as well. So we're going to try now. I've got Martin, Maria from our tech support team is on. We're thinking we might try and make you a host. What do you think, Martin? Are you still here?
Yeah, I'd say let's try that, and let's just be aware there might be just a few seconds of readjusting while that happens.
Right, so I'm going to go for it. Hang on, I'm going to make you an actual host. Right, make host. There's two Marias on, so maybe I should make both of them hosts. I don't know. Let's see if I made the right one.
You did, and then it disappeared, but it said you are a host. But I don't know why. It's so weird because I've shared my screen before. I don't know what's happened. It seems like there's been some update. Okay, so settings. No.
Can I just check, Maria?
There's nothing.
Are you now able to share the screen? Should we just try that?
There's nothing that says share screen. There's nowhere that says I can share screen. I changed my settings on the computer as well, but it's just not. There's nothing here that says share screen. Normally it's just at the bottom, but
okay. I'm going to put that down to a mysterious technical glitch. You may want to make Becky host again, and we should probably find a way of continuing. without holding
I
up
think
the
what
session
I'll
further?
do is I'll just talk without showing my slides, because we've only got half an hour left. So I can just, you know, people have seen plenty of pictures of sheep, so I think that's okay if I don't show my
Thanks,
images.
Maria. I'm sorry it's been such a nightmare for you.
It's been a horrible nightmare. It's been horrible, but these things happen, and it's yeah, it's just one of those things. So I'll just talk through. I'll look at my slides, so that'll remind me of what I'm talking about. So basically, I live on a farm with my partner John, who's born and bred Cumbrian, and we live near Coniston Water. And he's a sort of traditional family farmer. His family have farmed within 3 miles of where we farm now for 600 years, probably longer, but 600 years is when they started recording the families in the area. And I come from a very different background. I come from an art background. So farming was very new to me, but I think it was interesting to join John because I could see things with fresh eyes. And coming from an art background, when you decide to do a project, you just research and do it. So it didn't really matter that I didn't know anything about farming. I just sort of got my, just got stuck in really. So it's a small family farm. The actual farm's only 45 acres, and then John rents a lot of land from the National Trust, or does grazing for the National Trust, the National for Natural England, lots of sort of private landowners as well that want their land grazed in specific ways, and for a conservation charity as well. So he's very sort of involved in that, and we're both become more interested in moving away from a kind of making a farm quite slick in its operation, and going back to a traditional family farm, which is very diverse and complex and just has a little bit of everything, rather than just doing like Textile sheep. We have lots of different breeds of sheep. We've got mainly Cheviots, which are a good, strong, hardy sheep. John used to have Herdwicks, but he lost them all in foot and mouth. And you couldn't buy them again because they were just, there was very little stock. So he just got into Cheviot sheep. So we have them, Castlemilk Murits, Teeswaters, Hebridean. So this is Hebridean that I'm wearing, mixed with Blueface Leicester. So we have lots of different breeds of sheep on the farm, and that's because we're interested in doing things with the wool. And also we sell a lot of our meat to our local butcher. And so the different breeds are ready at different times. If you just have one breed of sheep and you lamb them at the same time, all the lambs are fat and ready to go to auction all at exactly the same time. But if you have a more primitive breed, it's slower growing, it means that lamb is ready for the butcher at a different rate. So it means that we can supply lamb and hogget kind of year round to our local butcher, which is great. So when I joined John on the farm, although I loved the farming side, I wasn't that useful to him. And so I felt that I didn't really want to go and get another job off site, because I liked being on site and I wanted to be my own boss after years of working for other people. So I just started to see how we could make more of what we have on the farm, and also knowing that subsidies would soon go for farmers and to not be reliant on farm subsidies. So I was looking at ways to increase profitability on the farm without increasing the number of animals, and becoming just becoming a bigger farm. I looked at how we could make the most of what was already there. And so that was selling our meat direct or selling it to the butcher, because then you're kind of got more of a guaranteed price rather than taking it to auction. And sometimes you get a good price, but it's like Russian roulette. You never know. Some weeks it's really bad. And also we have some off-grid accommodation that we rent from the National Trust. So that's a good income in the Lake District, because there's always visitors that want to stay somewhere unusual. And I have one Jersey cow, so I started making soap using excess milk from her. And that's turned into a nice little business in itself. And starting with wool, I didn't know anything about wool to begin with. So everything I started doing on the farm, I did very small at the beginning. So when I started the soap business, I probably invested about £50 on ingredients and equipment, and built up from there. So taking small risks. I tried making cheese, but that was a bit of a disaster. So then I tried with soap, and that worked, and then I was able to grow the business. So I did the same with wool, and I think the first batch of wool I got done, I got 20 kilos done, and that was probably about 6 years ago. And then this last time that I sent wool off, it was 2 tons. So I started very small, probably spending about £500, and I thought, if it's a disaster, I've lost £500, but that's like a holiday or something like that. So I always try and work it out that if it's a loss, it's not going to destroy our business, because especially on a family farm like John's family, who've had it forever, you're always looking at the past and the future. So your every decision that you make, you're thinking about, you know, you don't want to mess it up, because you know, you've got all that history behind you, and also leaving the farm in a better state for the next generations to come. So we always are quite cautious, actually. And that, I mean, naturally I wouldn't be, but with John, I am more cautious with how I spend, and it's actually been very beneficial, and has made that it's meant that I've not made so many costly mistakes in what I've done. So I learned a lot by just going to wool events like Woolfest and meeting people like Kate and Zoe, who are very open and very into knowledge sharing, which is fantastic, because not everyone in business is. So that was really brilliant. And then I met the farmer and writer James Rebanks, and I said to him he should do something with his wool, because I just thought it was crazy that you know, all farmers get very little for the wool, but him in particular, I thought surely his audience who love his book will want to buy his wool. So he said, you do something with it and just pay me when you've made some money. So that was a bit of a nightmare, like thinking, I don't know what to do with this. But anyway, I ended up making some products with it. Here is some of his tweed. I'll show you close up. You can see that's a lovely Herdwick tweed. It's just made into a little project bag, but I make shepherd's bags with it, which is the main thing that I make with his wool. And that's done in very sort of small scale, very completely traceable. I know sort of every part of that wool journey. But that got me thinking about what you can do with some of these breeds that you might not want to have as knitting wool. All of it, every sheep breed in the UK can all go into a fabric, you know, that you don't necessarily have to wear next to your skin, or it's lined, so it doesn't really matter if it's a bit scratchy. So that led me to a new project, which I just got some funding for from Farming and Protected Landscapes, FIPL, which is a DEFRA fund to support farmers as they move away from subsidies. And so that's brilliant to have that support, because actually to get so the 2 tons of wool that I've had processed, that's probably going to turn that into tweed will probably cost about £40,000. And that's partly why when you think, oh, wool's worth nothing, how come a wool jacket is so expensive? The processing is just expensive. It always has been expensive. It's not that it's more expensive now because the industry is a lot smaller. It's just that cheap plastic clothing is cheap for a reason. But wool has always been expensive, and you just wouldn't buy that many clothes. You just have 1 or 2 wool dresses and a couple of wool jackets. You just wouldn't have a new jacket every year from the high street. So that was brilliant. So I got funding for that, which is great. And I also did a Kickstarter campaign. So people have pledged and bought some of the fabric already without even seeing it. And so that project, this new tweed project, is Lake District tweed. And that's eventually, over 3 years, I'll be making 13 valley tweeds. So each valley will have its own specific tweed with wool from that valley. And the design will be based on special things about that valley. So in Coniston, it's the design is based on the copper mines and the Coniston slate, and Ullswater is based on the James Rebanks's work that he does in regenerative farming. So that's based on a wildflower meadow, which is lovely. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. And as Zoe said, I'm working with her. We were the flock, but that business it will be evolving into something else because you know, sometimes business doesn't go exactly how you want, and we've had to disband that business because it was 3 of us and it's now just me and Zoe, and so we're thinking of a new name at the moment, but it's all still going ahead and very exciting. But you know, these journeys are not always straightforward and they can be a big complex headache, but it's an incredibly exciting time to be involved with Wool. The Wool board is changing. They're really, really supportive of small businesses like ours, like Kate's, and they want to support our sort of scale of business at the moment. How they've been working is such a vast scale. It's been very difficult to access wool for brands and small producers like ourselves. I think the minimum was something like 8 tons, and you bought it in auction, and you're bidding against people that might not want you to be in the arena bidding against them, because they kind of, you know, they kind of like the system as it was. So they're trying to find new ways of working with people like ourselves who so that we can buy wool without having to go through auction, and can buy wool with provenance, so that's not lost, and it's not, when it goes in from a farm, it gets graded into a certain type, and so a lot of that information then is lost. And they're realizing through having conversations with people like us that that's actually the really important thing, and they're losing value. It's devalued at that point when it's no longer traceable. So they've been incredibly supportive, and it's great to see, actually, and it makes what we're doing, I don't know, I feel like having that support from a big organization is really brilliant. So I think I want to stop there because we've actually only got 15 minutes for questions, so I think it's probably better to go to questions, if that's all right.
That's totally fine.
That was a bit of a race through, and I'm sorry I have no pictures.
No, thank you, Maria. That was really brilliant and so interesting. And yeah, it's really good to hear how those discussions with the Wool Board are evolving as well. Because I know I think remember Kate saying when you went to speak to them, you thought you were going to get told off. But actually, it sounds like they've been really supportive. So lovely. I'm sure there'll be people with loads of questions.
I really thought, because
you thought you were going to get in trouble.
Yeah. I thought I was going to get in trouble, so it was brilliant that I didn't.
Who's got questions?
Owen Buddy's her.
Yeah, I thought she had 10 kids now, Melanie, or is it 9 still? Anyway, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, she stopped at 9.
She stopped at 9, fair enough. Anyone got questions for any of our speakers or anything on this topic in general? If you do, please feel free to unmute, or you can use your little Zoom hand function or type it in the chat or whatever. Have we all overwhelmed everyone with detail? Connor, are you? Yeah, go for it.
I just wanted to check. I think the British Wool Board operate in Northern Ireland, but I'm not entirely sure. Are we one of their regions, or have we been let go?
I thought you were, to be honest. I thought you were.
Definitely used to be.
But
you are still one of them according to their database. Whether or not, obviously, there's no physical border, and there has been quite a lot of poachers, shall we say, offering quite good price to use Southern Ireland as an export to the European Union. So whether or not as much fleece is coming from Northern Ireland as used to be, who knows?
Yeah, that's I heard that conversation over the fence the other week from my neighbour, who's like, he doesn't sell the wool, but he knows boys who do. And he goes, there's nothing going out to Britain now. It's all in Europe. So interesting.
Thanks, Connie. Yeah, it's good to, interesting to hear, isn't it? Like you say, Hannah's got her hand up. Hannah, go for it.
Hi, thanks everyone. Great to hear about wool as usual. I was curious, I found this movement around supporting wool that's been building really interesting to kind of watch and be involved in. I'm just curious as to what you think might happen next, because there's been a lot of support obviously for Kickstarter projects. And Maria, you've had some success with FIPL, the Farming and Protected Landscapes grant and things like that. Can you see any kind of changes happening with how this might be funded? Whether there's more funding becoming available from different sources. Yeah, I'm just curious about that journey, like to how we can get more infrastructure maybe, and the things we need to enable people to do more with wool.
I think there's funders see it as valuable, but when they see like the FIPL funders, they were shocked that because I did the Kickstarter as well, that I made my target in 3 days. So they can see that it's valuable. And there's other funds coming up. There was one that I didn't apply to because I didn't have time, and it was innovation in farming. So as long as you can present a good case, there is funding to help, because as I said, it is costly. Like for me to raise £40,000 to start this Lake District Tweed project, I just don't have that. But I think if it's successful, you know, those sort of people that like investing in businesses, they won't see it as a risk. They'll see it as an opportunity. So I think as it becomes kind of more mainstream, using British wool and it being seen as being profitable, then there's just going to be more of it. People are just wary, I think, of spending money or investing money if they're not sure. And there is still that thing, like that somebody said, Amanda Owen buries hers, but you know, she shouldn't be burying it. And if she knew that she could so easily make, you know, an Amanda Owen tweed that all her fans would buy. It's that sort of, I guess it's seeing opportunities. I just see opportunities a lot, and so it doesn't that would never occur to me to burn it. It's like, what can you do with it that's positive? And that's what I think regenerative thinking is. It's not just about regenerative farming, it's regenerative economics. And you know, the regenerative economics in terms of burying your wool means that all those other people have lost out. So when I do something with the wool, you're paying a haulier, you're paying the person to wash it, the carder, the spinner, the weaver, and I have like 3 part-time members of staff here now. That's and then I give money to the farmer as well. The farmer, with the Tweed project, the farmer will get £1 a kilo minimum, depending on the grade of wool, but the minimum is £1 plus 10% of the profit from the business goes back to the farmer. So that's 7 people that benefit by making a positive action. It's those ripples, I think, are really important. And so I always find it a bit upsetting when I hear people burning their wool or burying it.
Thanks, Hannah. Connor, yes. Oh, you're clapping, sorry. Has anyone else got questions for any of our speakers?
Can I just comment?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I missed the first 40 minutes of the webinar, but I'm farming just east of Lancaster with 600 sheep. And obviously, as the wool prices at the moment, it costs me as much to pay the contractor to shear those sheep as I get for the wool. So, yeah, I don't burn it or bury it because I don't think, you know, it should be used. But as it is at the moment, I'm doing that as a loss. I mean, I think what we've heard tonight is all really interesting, but it's how that translates to somebody who's just producing the wool and isn't necessarily taking it any further, that gets a reasonable return for that. And I know historically, I don't know if you go back probably early the last century, they always used to see on big hill farms, the wool check paid the rent. Well, I'm sure if I my landlord £600 for the year's rent, he wouldn't be that impressed. So, and I've always thought wool to me is a very sustainable fibre. So why isn't it with more? Anyway,
it's been used. A lot of it at the moment is going to China to make carpets for on cruise ships. Just on cruise ships. But I think the more it stays in the UK,
oh, you're glitching, Maria.
The more beneficial.
Oh, we've got Maria on super slow-mo.
And the more that brands are looking at the provenance, it will go up, and some of the breeds have really gone up this year. I know from the wool board, I was asking about Blueface Leicester, and the last 2 lots that were sold, sorry, the last 2 lots,
You were all right then, Maria. Is it gone again now?
Is that better?
You
my
kind
video
of
off.
Yes, that's better. Yeah, you just went super slow-mo. We heard about it going to China for cruise ships, and then and the price maybe coming back up for BFL.
I think they changed the carpet. They use wool because it's you know, it doesn't burn. If they use a synthetic and there was a fire in a big hotel or something, or in a cruise ship, then obviously you know, there's so many toxins in it, and that's why they use wool for the carpets on cruise ships, and they change them every six or 12 months. So it is a big business, but obviously they don't pay that much for it. But yeah, BFL has gone up. Apparently the last auction was last 2 auctions of it were £14 a kilo through the wool board, and I know that Hardwick's gone up as well, obviously not to that price, but still. So I just hope that as does seem to be a bit of a British wool revival, as that improves, then everyone's prices from the farms will go up. And one of the discussions I had with the wool board was, you know, they're okay with me doing stuff with the wool, but say if I went to the wool board and got it graded, so I'm paying them some money, that money goes back to all the farmers, shared between all the farmers. And I thought, oh yeah, that's actually better, because by keeping the wool away from the wool board, it's only helping a few of the farmers. I can pay them a better price, but actually by still working with them and working within their system, it improves, it's beneficial for all the farmers.
Lovely, thanks Maria. Thanks Dusty for the question and comment. That was really important. Have we got anyone else? We've got 5 minutes left. Anything else that anyone would like to ask or say? Yeah, Kate.
I just wondered if I could ask Dusty what breed are they? What breed do you keep?
Traditionally, we've kept, well, we've bought swales to breed. We're on North Country Mills with the Blueface Leicester. We're moving away from that to Aberfields and Abermaxes.
I don't know that breed actually.
No, well, they've come from New Zealand, but they're a composite breed. It's an Innovis breeding company, so they're like a mix of the Abermax. The Aberfield is like a mix of Textile and Blueface Leicester, and the Abermax is a mix of Textile and Charolais, and it's basically a sheep which does well off grass. So trying to fit that breed of sheep in with a sort of rotational grazing system.
Right.
So wool is the sort of, as long as they have some, is sort of the last of the considerations. It's all about
the
sheep which grows well off grass.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to note as well that it kind of pushing through with people then understanding the different breeds as well. So kind of 100% wool is fantastic. If we can get people know about Blueface Leicester and those qualities. Now people are starting to engage with Herdwick. Hopefully those conversations have been opened up, so they want to find out more about all these different breeds. And I think from the conversations we've had with people and kind of accessing and experimenting, actually some of the most success we've had with Kickstarter projects that I've worked on. So I was working on Project Lonk. No one really knows, or we don't know what the Lonk is going to turn out like. I can kind of say the characteristics and I've got kind of samples. However, we kind of, similar to Maria, it got funded within 48, 36 hours. And people are buying into that story of knowing the farmer, knowing what they're doing, knowing the struggles, and supporting kind of bringing local production back, that hopefully will enable other farmers to see the value in that. And I'm not saying kind of every farmer wants to diversify in that way, but understanding the different breeds and understanding the different qualities hopefully will allow designers and makers to see how much there is out there as well, and want to test out those different breeds.
So interesting, isn't it? Because like, I mean, I was, as you were all speaking there, like I was thinking I like of Kate Fletcher, the kind of fashion academic and kind of designer, and she's, I can't remember, there's this beautiful quote, but she's talking about, she's got this chapter in one of her books about like outdoor wear, and she talks about the Lake District, and everyone, like, obviously, you know, things like tweed and stuff used to be, didn't they, like outdoor wear, and it was literally from the landscape and from the kind of hard wearing properties of those sheep. And yeah, you know, these days like outdoor wear is kind of almost entirely like, she's like, it's almost you go inside to go outside, because it's like totally synthetic, like all neon colors. It's like completely the opposite of the landscape. So yeah, and I guess that fitted, Maria, with what you said about thinking back and thinking forward when you're on a family farm, and it's like tying it into the history and the culture, and it's everything, isn't it? That's why I, you know, one of the, well, so many things I think to love and find interesting about this area. And I think a few people have said, Adrian sent me a message in the chat as well about, you know, it'd be really good. I think, you know, everyone seems to have really enjoyed this discussion, and obviously there's, you know, there's other kinds of fibers. I mean, not necessarily even for clothing, but things in the landscape, like you know, I have a friend who's like a basket maker, and showing like the weaving and things that can be done with like reed mace. And yeah, we've had like a flax project locally, and yeah, Adrian was talking about hemp. So it'd be really interesting, I think, to, you know, I'd love to hear more about these different, you know, these different, yeah, properties of things, and how they grow, and how they could fit into like regenerative, like diversified farming systems. So yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to like all our speakers and everyone for coming tonight. It's Friday night, you could all be down the pub, you're here with us instead, like discussing about textiles and farming, which is amazing. And yeah, so thank you so much. And yeah, especially for everyone for coping with the technical glitches. Thank you to Melanie for like helping us behind the scenes, and Martin, who's gone now. Thank you everyone for your positive feedback in the chat. I think you've got like all our details, like all the speakers and people that you found their websites and places that you can kind of support. And thank you for sharing your knowledge. I've really enjoyed reading about your projects and everything in the chat as well. So I hope you all have a really pleasant weekend. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, please keep in touch, and let's keep this conversation about textiles and regenerative farming going. Take care all. Bye.
Bye everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.